All right, so moving into a different area of self-regulation, we're going to talk about regulating emotions and feelings. So, this is another important aspect of self-regulation. It's their ability to control and regulate their own emotions. Previously in this semester, we talked about how self-conscious emotions are emerging in toddlerhood, like pride, shame, guilt. These emotions give rise to more complexity in their social relationships, right? Because they are social by nature. They have to do with the sense of self and in relation to others. So children have to start understanding how their emotional states impact others and learn to manage their own emotions. So there's a lot they have to accomplish during these, especially these early years. So it can be very challenging for them since they are tiny humans without a whole lot of life experience yet. So they can really benefit from the help of adults to guide them through their emotions. They can learn to self-regulate. So controlling emotions and controlling feelings, I'm sure all of us have experienced explosive anger in the heat of the moment, or maybe bitterly ruminating and overthinking about a negative experience that made us upset. Sure, since we're all humans, we probably went through this before. As adults, we have developed a number of strategies to cope with our big emotional reactions. Young children, they're still very new to learning how to cope and soothe themselves. Between 2 to 6 years of age in this early childhood period, they're developing a handful of strategies to keep their emotions under control. So, what are some possible strategies kids might use to self soothe? We might see some physical acts like closing their eyes, turning away, putting their hands over their ears, even just breathing exercises. Maybe they just distract themselves with fun activities. They might also use their growing language and cognitive skills to communicate their feelings and reassure themselves, maybe telling themselves, I'm a big girl, I can do this. Some sort of that could be a form of self-regulation of their emotions, or just communicating their feelings to others. Could be another form of regulation, a healthy form of regulation. So they're learning to deal with their frustrations, their disappointments, and their hurt feelings that they might encounter. So emotional regulation can also help them develop more sympathetic and empathetic behaviors toward others. For example, if they see somebody fall down, they might feel anxious themselves. If they know how to regulate this emotion, they're more likely to offer help to their peer that's in distress, the person that fell. If they don't know how to regulate their emotions very well, they might be caught up in their own anxiety and might freeze up in the situation. So they wouldn't be as likely to be able to offer this helping hand, this empathy and sympathy. So just one example of how it does correlate to these two things. And these are two topics we'll come back to later. So let's talk about tantrums, big emotions. Kids can get really overwhelmed with their big emotions, and they don't know how to navigate those feelings. So they lose control, and that's what we see when we see a tantrum. So this is actually very normal and developmentally appropriate. They don't have a lot of life experience, so they don't have tools to work through their own emotions. This can result in a tantrum, which can involve, screaming, crying, throwing, sometimes even kicking or hitting others or objects. So tantrums can be super stressful and triggering for caregivers even. And this can cause caregivers to be reactive and reciprocate those big feelings toward the child, whether it's anger or frustration, because it can be triggering and very stressful. It's understandable, right? It's a stressful time for both the child and the adult. So it can be helpful to step back and remember that this tiny person needs your help right now. Remember, all behavior is communication. You can think of it like their brain is being hijacked by big emotions, and they are sent into an automatic stress response in their brain that they can't return from on their own. They need your help. So what are some helpful practices for guiding kids through these big emotions, through these tantrums? So first and foremost, number one rule is always safety, right? Keeping the child safe, setting boundaries for everybody's safety. That's always the number one. If they are resulting to, hitting, kicking others, that would involve stepping in and making sure that that does not continue because safety, right? So saying something like, well, first of all, stopping the behavior that is hurting themselves or others, and then stopping and having a conversation about it, saying like, hitting hurts. I can't let you hit me or your brother, but I'm here to help you when you're ready to talk. Something like that. So also just keeping yourself calm and grounded. Again, this can be difficult because tantrums are triggering and stressful, but when possible, trying to stay calm and grounded, holding space for their emotions. So acknowledging and invalidating what they're feeling and being specific. For example, like, I can see that you're very upset because we have to leave the playground. It's okay to feel upset. Sometimes I feel upset about things too. That'd be an example of like a script you could use during, a tantrum, and acknowledging and validating their feelings. After that, you've done your part. You have validated them and kept them safe and set those boundaries if needed. Now it's time to let the tantrum wave ride the tantrum wave, so to speak, right? Let it play out. Let them feel their emotions in whatever way they need to, as long as they aren't hurting anybody. Um, it can be counterproductive to shut down their emotions. So it's important to just let it happen, which of course is stressful, but that gives you the opportunity to later talk about it and try and prevent it in the future. So once they calm down, it's time for reflection. Avoid using logical explanations or trying to reason with them during the tantrum. This is a big mistake that can occur. Um, if you're trying to reason with them and be logical during their tantrum and they have those emotions, it's probably not going to get through to them, the information you're trying to convey. They're so overwhelmed by their emotions, it's not going to get through to them. And it might even make them angrier, more upset because they don't feel like they're being validated. Even as adults, we might be able to relate to this. Sometimes we just need to vent and express ourselves. And when somebody comes along with good intentions, trying to actively problem solve and push advice on you, it's good intention, but it can be frustrating on our end, right? Because we just want to vent. We feel unseen and unheard when people do this sometimes. We just want to vent and express ourselves. Same with kids, right? So waiting until the child has calmed down would be a better time to reason and reflect on the situation instead of during the heated moment, right? So that's when we can come in and brainstorm how to react and manage things better next time. Saying something like, you were so angry when your brother took away your toy earlier. It's okay to feel angry, but it's not okay to hurt somebody. What are some things you can do when you feel angry next time? So brainstorming with the child, have them think of ideas, help them, stuff like, maybe we can stomp our feet, or we can take deep breaths, or we can openly communicate with your brother that you were not done with the toy. So using your words. So these could all be possible brainstorms you come up with together. But doing this reflection after the tantrum can help create more adaptive strategies for next time, and hopefully reducing the amount of tantrums that we see as the child is learning these self-regulation skills with you through these conversations. So that's a bit on tantrums. It's a big part of early childhood because they have big emotions. There's no such thing as a bad child, right? Everything they do is developmentally appropriate. They just need our guidance sometimes, right? So that's tantrums, big emotions. Lastly, let's talk about culture and emotions. So children not only have to learn to control their emotions, but also to express them in socially appropriate ways. Infants and toddlers are very direct in communicating their emotions. They will make their feelings very apparent and will not settle down until their needs are met. Young children, they actually start to learn to control their emotional expressions based on the things they're learning about the world around them, social conventions. But they also learn that emotional expressions don't always reflect someone's true feelings. Sometimes people hide their true feelings to be polite or to achieve a social goal, like acting brave or avoid teasing. So they start catching on to these things and learning all the nuances of emotions according to cultural norms, learning to distinguish between emotional expression versus emotional experience, because they don't always align. For example, in many cultures, it's socially inappropriate to show disappointment when receiving a gift that you do not like. Now, if it's happening to a toddler, Someone who's just turning 2 or 3, they might openly express their disappointment because they haven't learned those conventions yet. But as they get older, 3, 4, 5 years old, they might start learning that, they need to mask their feelings and show excitement and thank the giver. It's just a social convention in many cultures, right? So these cultural conventions about how to express emotions in certain contexts are called display rules. So let's talk about some major research findings really quick about children and their use of display rules. So children around the world seem to gain the ability of recognizing when someone's masking their feelings. It seems to be a universal development. However, girls tend to be better than boys at displaying and recognizing masked feelings. Also, there are cultural variations in the age that children learn to use display rules. For example, Iranian children are more likely to use display rules than Dutch children, which aligns with cultural values of the two countries. Iranian culture stresses interdependence and group harmony, while Dutch culture values autonomy and personal needs. So it actually aligns with the cultural values. So children's increasing ability to regulate their emotional expression and read emotions of others are forms of socio-emotional competence. The cultural beliefs also impact the emergence of different types of emotions in children. For example, children's emotional expressions to their own accomplishments. How do they react to this? So how do they express it? Individualistic cultures, they value personal achievement. The parents will often try to boost their child's pride and their self-esteem. If they fail at a task, parents will try protecting them from feelings of shame and failure, which could promote self-esteem or could lead to inflated sense of self and maybe bragging. So a couple outcomes we could see there. Collectivistic cultures value the well-being of the group over individual desires and success. So parents often emphasize modesty and praising others when a child succeeds at a task. And if they fail a task, it may be seen as a discredit to the social group, to the family. So the parent might use shaming tactics to promote good behavior and performance. So there's just some differences we will see based on cultural values, and when and how these emotional expressions emerge. So that is it for emotional regulation. We have a couple more stops, but thank you for joining everyone, and I will see you in the next part.